Yeah, a lot of executives, of course, but team leaders as well, especially if we're talking about, corporate culture and, the very important things of hiring and retention and performance reviews, top talent development, high potential talent development. All these things fall to team leaders many times. And so the executives who are overseeing a larger company, yes, of course, but the team leaders, because each team has its own subculture, they have a lot of leverage.
All right, so we're walking out onto the tarmac. We're gonna head west over Florida, and the FAA has assigned us a box, as they call it, over the Gulf.
This is intentional disorientation. And we have to get lost in order to find ourselves in new ways. We're pushing over into microgravity, full weightlessness, our first parabola of 0G. Takes that kind of vulnerability, and this experience yanks you into that discomfort zone, but in the most joyful way.
Now that you have tasted space, you will forever walk the earth with your eyes turned skyward, because there you have been, and there you will always long to return. Welcome home.
Hey guys, welcome to the Grow IT podcast. Your host here, Alessandro Cutri, joined today by Brad McLain. He's the founder over at Designing Transformative Experiences. And today's going to be an interesting episode. We're going to be diving into a little bit about his story, the background, and kind of what went into founding this company, and really what their unique value proposition is. So make sure to stick around. But without further ado, Brad, I'll just kick it over to you. If you don't mind just, giving a quick introduction to the audience and telling them a little bit about your story and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, thanks, Alessandro. This is a real thrill. Thanks for asking me to appear on the podcast.
Of course.
Yes, Designing Transformative Experiences. I design transformative experiences for people, and I help leaders learn how to do the same thing. Design transformative experiences for their teams. And that includes largely tech companies, but fintech companies as well, but really any organization, doesn't even have to be a for-profit, that has leaders and teams in that basic structure. It's called experience design leadership. So we're asking people to recast themselves when they're leaders as experienced designers. And that applies to the teams, the people they work with, the people, their direct reports, instead of just focusing on, goals, quarterly goals and targets, performance reviews and hiring. Also, let's consider ourselves as, designing the experiences that these people are going to have working with us. And when we do that, we open up a whole new psychological toolbox for leadership. And that's what experience design leadership is all about. And my background is as a social scientist. So I study leadership and have done so for 30 years and worked with leaders of all stripes in the largest companies you've ever heard of, as well as the smallest ones you'll never hear of, and everything in between. And currently, in addition to designing transformative experiences, I'm also the director of corporate identity and culture at the National Center for Women in IT, which broadens participation in tech companies as well.
Wow, that's quite an extensive background, man. It's very interesting to see how you've been able to, fall where you are today, right? Essentially in doing designing transformative experiences. I was curious to ask, I'm sure the audience may be curious as well, like, what are some of like the typical challenges that will come up, when working with these, these leaders that you really help solve? Like, what are some of those common challenges that come up from them?
Well, first of all, a lot of leaders get pushed into leadership roles and they don't have the training for it other than on-the-job training, or they model themselves after leaders that they had, or better or worse. In some companies, there's actual structured leadership programs, but a lot of it is left to the experience and the personality of the individual. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but if it's not developed and if it's not recognized, where are you starting from and how do you grow as a leader, then that's the first challenge to clear. And when we're talking about, designing transformative experiences, what does that really mean? So in my work, we had to have a good researchy and researchable way to define this, so we know if an experience is transformative or not. In
Hmm.
other words, you might have an extraordinary, wonderful experience, but if it doesn't rise to the bar of transformative, what makes the difference? So in our work, a transformative
Yeah.
experience is a learning experience that has an identity impact. In other words, changing one's sense of self, who you
Yeah.
think you are or who you want to become. And when it
Yeah.
rises to that level, we have a transformative experience that ripples through someone's life, not just a professional life but also their personal life beyond that. And these are the
Yeah.
kinds of leaders, that we always remember, that we emulate, that we all seek to be like when we assume a leadership
Yeah.
role. There's
Yeah.
secret sauce involved. Yeah.
And so with these leaders itself, are you like, do you guys work specifically with certain leaders, or is it executives of all shapes and forms? Like, what does that look like for you guys?
Yeah, a lot of executives, of course,
Mhm.
but team leaders as well, especially if we're talking about, corporate culture and, the very important things of hiring and retention and performance reviews, top talent development, high potential talent development. All these things fall to team leaders many times. And so the
Mhm.
executives who are overseeing a larger company, yes, of course, but the team leaders, because each team has its own subculture, they have a
Mhm.
lot of leverage in what
Mhm.
the daily experience and the career experience of someone who works for them is. We all work on different teams, right?
Yeah.
In our work, and
Yeah.
and the teams are very different culturally. If we're going to grow and design experiences on those teams, we have a huge lever for making change, for impacting people's lives.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, like, when it comes to like industries or specific job titles, are you guys like specialized in anything in terms of like, hey, we love working with, X people, or is it more of like,
Yeah.
are you guys across the board in that sense as well?
It's a bit across the board. We have worked with, of course, like I said, an emphasis on tech companies,
Hmm.
large and small startups,
Yeah.
Google, Facebook, Apple, all
Neat.
those kinds of larger companies, but also fintech companies. And we have also worked with educators. We've worked with nonprofit leaders,
Yeah.
government
Wow.
agencies. Leadership is a ubiquitous challenge.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
whatever
I would
your
agree.
goals may be,
Yeah.
we're dealing with the human psyche and we're dealing with human dynamics. And so knowing some of the social science, empowering leaders with that kind of context and a lens for looking at what they do and who they are as leaders. We ask our leaders three main questions when we start out,
Yeah.
wherever they're coming from and whatever organization they're in.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Mhm.
How and why are we doing it?
Yeah.
And then the critical question for transformative leadership, who are we becoming while we do it?
Wow.
And this is a question that
Yeah.
most leaders never think to ask.
Yeah.
It touches on, the deeper meaning and purpose of work,
Hmm.
as well as team dynamics, how we think about goals and objectives and performance and KPIs, and how we mentor our talent, mentor and protege relationships. And it changes the way leaders think about themselves. And that's all internal.
Yeah.
It can also be applied externally, right? So looking at experience design
Yeah.
causes us to look at the customer experience differently,
Hmm.
how the products and services are designed differently, what our customer life cycle may be. You've
Yeah.
probably heard of the experience economy, which was kind of a phrase coined by my friend Joe Pine. He's now working on a book called The Transformation Economy. The idea that our clients and customers and consumers are seeking experiences, yes,
Yeah.
but they're experiences that are liable to change them, that have a
Yeah.
probability of making a difference in their lives. And so this
Yeah.
affects
So
marketing,
and
messaging.
on that itself, like, could you share like like an example? I don't know if you don't have to get into like specific client name or anything, but of a transformative experience that maybe someone had from when they first started working with you, and
Yes.
then what happened afterwards. I would love to hear that.
I'm so excited, and I always get excited when a transformation powerfully happens. We just launched a new program in November with the Zero G Corporation. It's the Zero G Executive Leadership Experience. And so
Mhm.
a lot of times in our training, we'll go through the psychology in a classroom format, online and in person, so that there's context and many of the things we're talking about right now. But
Yeah.
since it's experience design, we have to have an experience in the training. So when we partnered with Zero G, the experience, the capstone experience of the leadership training became a Zero G flight. Now, if you're not
Yeah.
familiar with Zero G, this is the astronaut training aircraft where we can create
Huh.
30 to 40 seconds of microgravity as we fly in parabolas. This is how astronauts train for floating and weightlessness.
Hmm.
And if you've never seen it before, check it out online. So this is the experience that we are providing to leaders in the context of our leadership training, the
Hmm.
capstone experience. In other programs, we take them on different kinds of adventures and challenges and travel. But this one is Zero G. And we just this weekend had our first crop of executives fly on it out of Fort
Wow.
Lauderdale. And
Wow.
already the indicators of transformation are
Yeah.
rippling from these participants.
Yeah.
And it's so exciting to hear it and hear them narrate the experience. How will it be taken back to their companies?
Yeah.
How will it ripple through the rest of their lives? That is what unfolds in the post experience phase. After the big risky thing is over, how
Yeah.
it gets narrated and translated by the person with the structured guidance of our training is where the rubber hits the road and how
Yeah.
it will change them as leaders. And that is actually happening right now. I'm hearing about it daily as we're
Wow.
working with these leaders who flew this weekend.
That's awesome. That's always exciting stuff, right? And it goes beyond, like, you can see the I'm sure probably seeing those transformations is what you're probably in the business for, right? At the end of the
Oh
day,
yeah.
like, that's the stuff that is probably more
Yeah.
fulfilling than anything, right?
Yeah.
And being able to see people go from being a different person and then transforming. I think that's I could
Yes.
see it leaving an impact on you as well, right? In that itself.
It does. And, it's transformational for me as
Yeah.
well. And
Yeah.
that's another dividend of this that leaders that they get from this approach, experience design leadership, is that they may be successful in meeting their quarterly targets and delivering things on time, on schedule, on budget. But are they successful in positively impacting the lives of the people who work with them? Yes, that's a good bar, and a good leader has that. But are they successful in changing those people's lives in terms of their identity growth? So when we use
Yeah.
identity growth as the metric, suddenly we unlock the keys to retention and the development of talent that we can't really approach in any other way. And I
Hmm.
know most tech leaders aren't equipped with a huge social science background. So
Yeah.
that's why we boil it down into an understandable and practical toolkit. And that's detailed in my book, Designing Transformative Experiences. But
Yeah.
it's called the ELVIS model.
Huh.
And, I figured if we're going to have an acronym, we might as well make it memorable, right? So it
You
stands
did a
for
good
the
job with that. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
it stands for the experiential learning variables and indicator system, but it basically has three
I
components.
love it.
One, we have to have an experience and design experiences that invite people to a discomfort zone.
Hmm.
You've heard of getting out of your comfort zone,
Yeah.
but actually intentionally entering a discomfort zone is a little bit different. It requires, that intentionality that someone enters it into with. So the zero G flight is a discomfort zone for everybody. I don't care who you are or what
Yeah.
you imagine it would be. You've never experienced anything like this, and you never will again unless you become an astronaut.
Yeah.
When we have an experience, the second component of Elvis is that we all do this. We translate that experience into a narrative. We're hardwired to do this.
Hmm.
So, what kind of narrative will you generate from the experience? Zero G or swap any other experience in there. So, experiences working with your team, for
Yeah.
example. And if those experience narratives are powerful enough to impact our identity narratives, the
Hmm.
stories we tell about who we are, the stories we tell
Yeah.
ourselves and others,
Yeah.
then it rises to that level of transformation. It changes our identity narrative. So, as
Yeah.
leaders, we ask the question, what kind of narrative do I want my direct reports to construct out of this experience that I'm designing at work
Hmm.
or otherwise? And then we backwards engineer it. Let's set up the experience and design it so we increase the probability of that kind of narrative. And that kind of narrative they generate will ripple through the rest of their work. This is how identity growth happens. And we're harnessing this psychological process for the purpose of leadership. In a nutshell, that's Elvis. We, of course, get into it a lot
Yeah.
deeper in our
Yeah, yeah,
program.
yeah, yeah. So what was, I guess, what was from you, Bradley, because obviously you've gone down this path of, creating a very unique type of company, right? I don't know if there's a lot of competitors that do exactly what you do. I'm sure there's, some leadership consulting in some type of way, but I've liked the way that you've packaged, obviously what you guys do. Where did this stem from? Like, how did you go about, creating a company like this and then, going down this path? I want to just maybe, rewind a
Yeah.
little bit and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's something I cover extensively in my book as well. But when I had my own transformative experiences in my younger professional life and personal life, I wanted to know what made them tick. In particular,
Hmm.
transformative experiences aren't always rosy and fuzzy and happy.
Yeah.
Many times they're born out of tragedy. In most cases, transformative experiences are a combination. So think of your own I ask in my workshops, right? What was your most transformative experience so far?
Yeah.
How old were you?
Yeah.
What happened? Who else was there? And most importantly, how did it change you? In my case, I was working at NASA on the space shuttle program. And I was assigned the mission of STS-107, which turned out to be the final flight of Columbia, which was our
Mhm.
second space shuttle disaster.
Yeah.
Challenger happened in the mid 80s, and then Columbia happened in the early 2000s. So I was devastated. I had worked with that crew for many years and the scientists and people, the good people of NASA who worked on it. And I was cast into a year of depression and being lost, sorting this stuff out. And in the process of grieving and trying to forge a new path for my profession, knowing that I was wanting to leave the space shuttle program after that, I realized something about the crew. That they would not have traded their lives willingly for the science on that mission. I
Yeah.
knew them and talked with them a lot, but they were willing to risk their lives for something larger than themselves, the human future in space. And they saw their role as
Yeah.
contributing to that, and it's worth the risk. And they paid the price with everything they had, their lives, right?
Mm.
And I looked in the mirror and I said, hey, what is it that I am willing to take the big risks for? What
Yeah.
am I willing to contribute? What do I have to offer? And that process transformed me. I decided to go back. I decided to re-engage, get the PhD,
Hmm.
contribute what I had to the world, and follow their example, honoring and telling their story at every opportunity. So thank you for asking
Yeah.
that I had to ensure that their legacy and ripple effects in other people's lives endured. That was the first transformative experience that led me
Yeah.
to it. I had one other role model, I still do, thankfully, that I've worked with for over 25 years, and that's Jane Goodall, the
Yeah.
primatologist and conservation activist. Worked with the Jane Goodall Institute and served on a board of directors and on her Roots and Shoots program for many years. She just sent me a message this morning
Mm.
talking about her plans for 2025 and the inspiration and perseverance and message of hope
Yeah.
for change and transformation. And we've talked for many years about the psychology of transformation and how she herself has transformed over the years, has been like rocket fuel in my engine for
Yeah.
many years. And it's
Yeah.
so lovely to have leaders in our lives who can engage us in transformative experiences. So, learning how that works psychologically is where this all started. Applying it to leadership in tech companies and other companies is an offshoot of my work over 10 years consulting with companies
Yeah.
and helping their leaders grow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's always, inspiring to hear someone that has that, drive and motivation beyond, like it's something that happened to you that you felt that you needed to then go out. And I think those are the best types of companies that actually get built is from those, like you said, almost transformative experiences, right? Like from
Yeah.
the transformative experiences that then go to shape your view and then, your passion moving forward. So I can definitely appreciate that. When it comes to like, over the years, like, because I did want to ask you this, like when growing your own practice, right, and growing your own business, for people that are looking to do that, there may be leaders that are looking to step into that role,
Yeah.
as maybe, doing something themselves. What type of advice would you be able to give to them?
Ooh. I, you know, it's along the lines of what you were just touching on. Obviously, making money is important to have a successful business.
Yeah.
But if that's your only goal, you kind of have an empty purpose. Your mission statement is a little evacuated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having a purpose and a deeper meaning to work and
Yeah.
our professional identities is what sustains us. Yeah.
Yeah.
You may be familiar with the poet still alive, David White, and
Yeah.
he's been an inspiration to me for many years. He tells a story often in his workshops, which is he was very weary, and a friend told him, and he's saying to a friend of his, "Oh my gosh, I need a break. I'm exhausted. My work is overwhelming me." And his friend said, the cure for that kind of weariness isn't necessarily taking a break. The cure for it is wholeheartedness.
Hmm.
Wholeheartedness unlocks energy that you have but aren't using. In other words, once you're doing something, leading a company or forming a company that ignites your passion, there aren't enough hours in the day to get everything
Yeah.
done that you want to get in. And you have this, you're forcing yourself to sleep because you just want to accomplish all these tasks, you want to engage, you want to grow it. When you're lit with that inspirational fire, you know that your purpose, personal and for your business, are aligned.
Yeah.
And that kind of energy is not only what makes a startup successful in part, but it's also what is contagious and inspires others to work with you, to work
Yeah.
for you,
Yeah.
and buy into that mission. So articulating what that might be is
Yeah.
one of the most rewarding things we can do. Now, if you do that,
Yeah.
even if your company fails or a version of it fails the first or second time, it's still an experience worth having and will
Yep.
refuel your efforts going forward or taking you into a different direction uh,
Definitely.
as you do
Yeah.
that before. So I think that's the purpose and meaning in work, understanding what it is. And that's a discovery process, by the way. It's not always apparent to us at the beginning, but it
Yeah.
becomes apparent to us through experience. So listening to yourself and communicating with yourself about what's igniting you is a skill. Yeah.
Yeah.
And taking risks. The other one is taking risks.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like the way that you communicate with yourself and the way that you're almost able to tap into what it is that you do is a skill in itself that you have to train, right?
That's
Because
right.
if
That's
you
right.
don't, if you're not consciously aware of or self-aware of the fact of what it is that you're trying to build, what is the reason behind it? Because like you said, everybody gets in the name of the a business probably for money, right? A lot of people probably have a
Sure.
similar pursuit of like, hey, I
Oh,
want to make money from this thing. Let me go and start this idea. But
it's got
what
to
you
be
start
there.
to realize, right, even as business owners, that like the money is never the thing that actually truly, will fulfill you at the end of the day. It has to be, you have to have something behind that is driving that. And when the road gets tough, right, it's not going to be the money that motivates you to
Right.
continue to go. It's going to be the deeper why and having
Yeah.
that exploration. So I do like that point because I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. And it's not just the why, by the way. I mean, we have to know what our why is. Why are we doing this?
Yes, yeah,
But the deeper level question is the who. Again, back to the original question. Who are we becoming while we do this? Who
yeah,
am I becoming while
yeah,
I start this business and
yeah, yeah.
and put everything I have into it? My identity starts to change. And
Yep.
this is the deepest form of human growth that we can
Yeah.
embrace. So,
Yeah.
the why is great, but don't stop at the why. Who are we becoming while we do it?
I
And
love
asking
that.
that of yourself and your team,
Yeah.
that's experience design leadership. Let's design our experiences so that we become the people that we
Yeah.
want to become.
Yeah. I use this analogy a lot whenever I think about, building businesses and, being an entrepreneur and, starting a company is that it's often like you're climbing a mountain, right? It's like you have this like big mountain ahead of you and you have to climb this mountain. Now, maybe there's two ways to get there, right? Like, you could either climb up the mountain and go through the struggle and like the hardships of actually going up that mountain and it being cold and having to deal with all that. Or you could get like, dropped off at the top of the mountain by a helicopter. Say a helicopter goes and
Right.
drop you off, right?
Yes,
You're
yes.
both you're at the top of the mountain, but
Yeah.
you become a different person based upon the journey that you actually went to. And like, I'd rather be the person, right? That my
Yeah.
identity is rather be the person that actually went through went
Yep.
through the actually climbed the mountain himself, right? And
Yeah.
got there to the top. And so when you talk about identity and you talk about that
Yeah.
frame, I love that because I think about that all the time. It's like, who do I want to become? And I think that's such a powerful frame in thinking about what's going to actually motivate you. It's like,
Yep.
hey, who am I becoming while doing this?
Alessandro, your example is spot on. No, I used to take leaders and still do sometimes to Africa for a workshop where we climb Kilimanjaro. And it's not a mountain to be sneezed at. It's
Yeah.
20,000 feet. It's on
Mhm.
the equator, and there's
Yeah.
ice glaciers on top, even though it's on the equator. It's not a technical climb, but it'll kick your ass.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
everybody makes it to the top,
Yeah.
and we always have a struggle, right?
Hmm.
And what the message is process, not product. You could be deposited on the top of a mountain theoretically, not
Yeah.
that one because it's too high for a helicopter, but right, you
Yeah.
could be deposited there. But and we have a saying around the office is that experience is the difference between knowledge and understanding. So
Mm.
I can know about something and know about the mountain. I can know about how high it is. I can know about the routes I'm going to take, but I don't understand what it's like to walk that path, to
Yeah.
chew that dirt, to slide on that volcanic ash, to breathe the rarefied air, to feel hypoxic because there's not enough oxygen in my lung. I don't understand it,
Yeah.
even though I know about it until I've lived it. And by the way, the other thing about mountain climbing
Yeah.
is when you get to the top, you're only halfway done. The top is not the goal.
Yeah.
Returning home safely is the goal after
Yeah.
reaching the top. So, same with experience design.
Yeah.
For example, with our Zero G Executive Leadership Program, we have half of our workshopy stuff before the flight in anticipation of it and
Yeah.
priming and framing our leaders for the experience. Then they have the actual flight, a life-changing experience, floating in microgravity, lots of structured team building and leadership building activities. And
Yeah.
then the second half, which is the part that most leaders you have underdeveloped skills in, is what happens as we come down from the experience, translate it into a narrative, and boil it down to practical skills that we
Yeah.
can take with us for the rest of our lives. That part is the coming down of the mountain.
Yeah.
And that part is where our identities change, where
Yeah.
the growth happens. It's kind of like going out to the gym and working your muscles to failure. You have to have a recovery period because the muscles grow in the recovery period. They get broken down in the workout, but they
Yeah.
grow in the recovery period. Same with our identities. We
Yeah.
have to have that reflective meaning making stage. How do we train leaders to know about and equip them with the skills to design such experiences for their direct reports?
Yeah.
That's what Designing Transformative Experiences, my company, is all about.
Yeah. And I think that is the perfect place to end, Brad. It has been a pleasure getting the chance to dive into your mind and, talk through all the different things that you guys are building over there. It's definitely something that I'm a fan of. And I love the way that you broke down your methodology. I think it's practical. It makes sense. And for any person that's ever had to do something, it just correlates, right? It correlates with the way that you're breaking it down. So if people are listening to this and like, hey man, how do I find you? How do I check you out? Like what would be, I know you said you got a book. Like what are some of those things that people can go check out of yours to see what it is that you're doing?
Yep. And first of all, thank you, Alessandro, and everybody at Grow IT, the team behind you. Appreciate you all. And thank you for inviting me. DesigningTransformativeExperiences.com. Designing
Okay.
Transformative Experiences, the book on Amazon or anywhere else books are sold. You can get in contact with me through the website. Check out the book. If you like what you see, let's work together, customize something that will help you become an experienced designer and train others to do so as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We'll make sure to include that in the description. If you guys are listening, make sure to go check out Brad and what they're doing over at Designing Transformative Experiences. We hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Thanks for tuning in. If you did make it all the way to the end, we hope you have a great rest of the day. Take it easy, guys. Ciao, ciao.